Okay, guys, pause whatever you are doing right now. Because if you have been saying, I'm fine for the last several months, and deep down, you know you are not fine, this episode was made specially for you. Hello, my beautiful sunblazers and heroes, and welcome back to the Rosie Lastra podcast, the podcast where science meets soul and healing becomes a flight. I'm your host, Rosie Lastra, grief recovery coach, nervous system nerd, and the woman who absolutely refused to let her worst day become the last chapter. Before we get into today's conversation, I want to take a moment to share why this platform even exists, because it matters and because you matter. I lost my son, Jeremy, to a rare form of cancer in September of 2024. And I need you to understand something. That kind of loss does not just break your heart, it breaks your identity. There were 8 months where I did not know who I was anymore. 8 months where I could not see past the grief. 8 months where the woman I had been, the mother I had been, felt like she no longer existed. But here's what I know now. On the other side of that, God did not just meet me in that pain. He redirected me. From that loss, Jeremy's Unity Flight was born. This podcast was born. And this year, the Jeremy Lastra Foundation will be created to help individuals and families who cannot afford holistic healing treatments, because I believe this with all my heart. People should not lose their lives because they can't afford access to care that could possibly save their lives. And today's conversation is part of that mission. Here's what I need you to understand before we dive in. Your nervous system cannot tell the difference between the past and the present. So if you are still carrying grief, old trauma, or old stories about you, who you are, your body is still living in that moment right now. So you listen to this. That is not weakness. That is neuroscience. And today's guest has spent nearly 4 decades helping people break out of that loop from the inside out. So I need you to grab something to write with, because this conversation is going to challenge you. Let's go ahead and fly. Today's guest is someone who truly embodies the bridge between science, healing, and human transformation. And I genuinely geek out over him. And if you know me, that means a lot. Dr. David Kamnitzer is a highly respected practitioner, teacher, and speaker with almost 4 decades of experience in the healing arts. He is a valedictorian and magna cum laude graduate of Palmer West, class of 1987, and has been in private practice ever since then, helping thousands of individuals move out of pain, restore balance, and reclaim a higher quality of life. Known to his patients and colleagues simply as Dr. David, he is recognized as a leading expert in the integration of natural healing, particularly holistic chiropractic, with something called ontological coaching. Now, I need you to hear what that means, because this is where Dr. David is different from anyone you have previously heard of. Ontological coaching is the practice of going of going after the unconscious patterns in your being, the ones that are quietly running your life without you even realizing it. The patterns you don't even know are there. He finds them, and then he helps you dismantle them. Through this powerful combination of physical alignment and deep self-awareness, Dr. David supports people in creating breakthroughs that extend far beyond the body, impacting their mindsets, their relationships, and their purpose. His approach allows individuals to experience meaningful transformation by simply becoming aware of what has previously gone unseen, creating space for life to open new and remarkable ways. I apologize. Dr. David is married to his wife, Carmen, and is a proud father of 2 sons, Jonathan and Michael. He also enjoys time with their family dog, Lana. I love that detail. His mission is simple, yet profound: to help people achieve and sustain a level of health and well-being that empowers them to live truly outstanding lives. Not adequate, not surviving, outstanding. Dr. David, let me bring you on. Whoops, hold on a second. Let me go back. What the heck is going on here? Cancel. Save. David, display, guest. Save. Okay, here we go. Hello. How you doing, Dr. David?
Good. I was afraid I was lost in Cyberland for a minute there, but good to be here.
I so apologize. I am fairly new to the space of podcasting, so once in a while I have a little bit of technical difficulties.
No
Well,
problem.
welcome. It's my honor and pleasure to have you here, Dr. David. But before we go deep into the stuff we're going to be talking about, which we are going to go extremely deep, I have to ask you this first because the listeners deserve to hear this, okay? And what I want to ask you, Dr. David, is what inspired you to go into this realm of into the realm you went in?
Okay. So this is probably going to be a long answer. Okay. So feel free to interrupt me if it's getting too complex. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Will do.
So I was born in 1956 in Los Angeles, California, to 2 Western European intellectual agnostic parents. I was the first of 2 boys. My younger brother is almost 5 years apart, and they didn't have the word for it at the time, but he is on the spectrum. And that had a big impact on our family. And so there was no acknowledgement formally about spirituality, about religion, about God in my family. So I didn't have any dogma to have to deal with. And I also didn't have any acknowledgement of other realms or anything like that. I would say the closest thing to a God in our family was education, was the mind. And so that obviously can be beautiful, and that can also be a trap. Many people will do that as a way to avoid their emotions, or do that as a way to avoid becoming intimate with the physical world, or to become intimate with what could possibly be beyond the mind. But yet, the upside of it was that I was given the message loud and clear that I could think for myself, and it was important to think for oneself, and it was a contribution to think for oneself. And that has been a blessing, that I've been able to um, recontextualize in a much bigger picture than my family of origin had. And so that brings up a principle that I've learned in my life that I'll be happy to share with your tribe. And that's a principle that I kind of tongue in cheek call steal the gold. Steal the gold. Steal the gold. So, in just about any experience or any situation, there are things about it that don't register for you at all. There are things you don't like. Uh, there are things you really do like, and you can learn a tremendous amount by acknowledging the things you like and why you like them, and make them your own. And that's what I mean by steal the gold. And also, you can use your awareness of what you really don't like to your advantage as well. Because if there's something that's really rubbing you the wrong way, there's probably something you really value highly that you feel isn't being honored. So you can use the fact that there's something you really don't like to inquire into what are the values that you feel aren't being respected. And then you can become more conscious of what you do value. And it's to your advantage to be more conscious about what you do value. So, so that was my early background. And what I'm going to describe next, the words I'm going to use, are words that I would have now looking back on my childhood and my early teen period. But it's important to understand that as I was experiencing those years, I didn't have these distinctions. I didn't have this vocabulary. I didn't have these concepts. I was kind of going blind. But even though I was going blind in terms of mentally understanding what was going on, there was a very strong sense from the very beginning that that there was a burning desire to really, really know what is real, like really real, like with a capital R. And I didn't know it at the time, but I know now that I was also an empath. And so I was picking up all sorts of energies before I even knew the whole idea of establishing boundaries. And so that's another thing where that can be a blessing or it can be a curse to be that energetically sensitive. And it usually will create a lot of suffering for you unless you understand what is happening and you develop the ability to be by yourself for a long time and to be able to sense your own energy when it's not interacting with other people's energies, so that you have a baseline to understand what is happening when you're around other people, and then, or other spaces or pieces of music or art or places on the planet. And at least you have a reference point for how your energy is changing and being impacted by something that is not your own person. And so, over the years, I did learn to establish boundaries that work better for me, behavioral boundaries, linguistic boundaries, energetic boundaries. But there were many painful lessons along the way to really kind of master that one. And I realized later that without knowing it, I was developing a lot of codependent tendencies because without me knowing it, I was trying to change other people so I would feel better. And that's really the essence of codependency. You're trying to change other people so you will feel better. And you think you're being loving, but you're really not. You're really trying to manipulate other people to change so that they'll change so that you'll feel better. And until you realize that that's what's happening, you're probably going to just keep doing that. So, so over the years, I did develop the ability to have my empathic abilities work for me and to have my strong mind, my ability to think for myself, to go deep in studying things, to think in terms of first principles, to not just believe what other people say or not even believe what I'm believing, to hold it lightly, that, there's a difference between believing something or holding something to be possible and really knowing something. And if you don't live that distinction, you can fool yourself all the time into thinking you know more than you know. And if you're fooling yourself into thinking you know more than you know, you're not going to go deeper. And you've got to go deeper if you really want to know. But if you want to know, you've got to be okay with knowing you don't know. Because being okay with knowing you don't know is the doorway to knowing. And in this culture, there's a lot of environments where it's not emotionally safe to admit that you don't know something. Like I never got an A in a class because I raised my hand and said, I know I don't know it. And but you've got to be okay with knowing you don't know something because if you're not, you'll never know anything.
Got it.
And you'll never have the kind of certainty from which you can move from. So I'm describing with words things where I was going blind going through it. Something was moving me, but I had no sense of what it was or how to control it or anything. And I realize now that there were two questions that were burning in my soul that I wanted to get a handle on. Because remember, looking back, I realized what I was all about was knowing what was real, what was really true. And so the two questions that really drove, I would say, my life for the first at least 20 years, if not 25 or 30, was my soul was really wanting to know the answer to the following two questions. You staying with me, Rosie, or is this too much?
No, I'm actually writing. I'm actually taking notes as you're talking.
Well, this is being recorded, Rosie, so chill out. Okay. So one question was this: if there really is a God, and God really is all loving, and from our perspective, all powerful, all intelligent, and is kind of our father, mother, and really loves us and wants the best for us, why is the game on earth set up to allow so much suffering, so much pain, so much unworkability, so much violence? And so, again, I was not looking for something to believe. I really wanted to know the answer to that question. And then there was a second question that rises from that question, pretty naturally. And that is, how come some people seem to be so healthy, so happy, so successful, and how come some people seem to be so unhealthy, unhappy, and unsuccessful? In other words, I had an a priori faith that this is not random, that this is not chance, that there must be some, I didn't have the words at the time, but there must be some laws of God, there must be some laws of nature, there must be some laws of creation, that these are just natural consequences. And that's a really important idea, because it takes it out of being about you or about me and who's right and who's wrong and who's good and who's bad. But if you think about it being just there are laws in the universe, and then based on what you do and the way you're being and what you're believing and your values, there are natural consequences to those things. And some of those natural consequences tend to produce high levels of health. Some tend to produce low levels of health. Some tend to produce high levels of peace and joy. And some tend to produce consistent anxiety and angst and fear and anger and judgmentalness and cynicism. And some people just by the natural laws of existence have a strong track record of success, of accomplishing meaningful goals, and other people don't. And the big challenge when you're working with people, and pardon my language here, but the thing that's most challenging when you're dealing with humans as opposed to dealing with rocks or plants or animals is that human beings make shit up.
That is so true.
And so the thing is there's nothing inherently unworkable about making shit up. And the problem is when the shit you make up, you take for reality.
Wow.
And when the shit you're making up, which we can now call your stories,
Right.
when your stories don't occur to you like stories, so everybody take a deep breath, because here's like the first whammy.
Okay.
When your stories don't occur to you like stories, when your stories occur to you like reality, those stories use you. Those stories start using your life. Those stories start using your body. Those stories start using your mind. Those stories start using your relationships. Those stories start using your work. Those stories start using your money. Those stories start using your attention. Those stories start using your mind.
That's wild.
And you don't know that that is happening until you know that's happening. I'm going to say that again. You don't know that's happening until you begin to question that maybe that is what is happening. Okay.
Gotcha.
All right. And so that's like, we could say in modern day vernacular, when you're lost in your stories and you don't know you're lost in your stories, and you're being that your stories are reality. That's like, in modern day vernacular, we would say, that's like being lost in the matrix.
Got it.
That is being lost in the matrix.
Makes sense.
And the only way that I've seen to consistently get out of the matrix is to begin to doubt that what you have taken to be reality might be just a story. that you believed for so long that it's constraining and shaping your life, your identity, your perception, what you can think, what you can feel, what you can imagine. And the name of the game, like if I was some evil being and I wanted to manipulate you, and there was only one of me and there were millions of you, and I couldn't physically force you and control you that way, the best way to control you would be to, without you knowing, would be for me to influence your perception of things. And what I would attempt to influence you to is the idea that you are free. Because if you're not free, but you believe you're free, I've got you. And it would be like if you wanted to make a secure jail, but you didn't have a lot of money to hire people to keep you in jail, all you would have to do is have the inmates believe they're free.
And okay, that's a deep question. That's kind of deep.
Yeah, but think about it. If you were in jail, but you didn't know you were in jail, you believed that was just life. You didn't know there was anything outside of it. If you just believed you were just a free person and that was life, I wouldn't need to even hire any guards.
That's true, because that's all you would know. Fair enough.
Right.
Fair
So
enough.
so that's what's happening on planet Earth. That's what's been happening on planet Earth for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. That's the game that's been going on planet Earth. Okay? That people have been thrown to be a certain way, genetically, culturally, you name it, biologically, you name it, religiously, medically, educationally, you name it. They've been thrown to be a certain way. And the way they've been thrown to be is that life is like a menu. And you're given a menu, and you have all these choices on the menu. And so you think you're free. You think you're free because you can choose all these things on the menu. But what you don't know is that 99% of all of life is not on the menu. The menu you've been given that you don't know is a menu, you're being that is real life, that is life. That is you. That is the other person. That is your possible future. Those are your only choices. If I can get you to believe that without knowing you're believing that, I can control you. It's like you think you have choices because you can pick different things on the menu. But really what you're doing is you're just picking another chair on the Titanic. You could be on the left side of the boat. You could be on the right side. You could be in the luxury suite. You could be down in the boiler room. But that ship is going down. And you don't even know that is what is happening. You're trying to eat the menu, and it doesn't taste good, but it doesn't occur to you that you're eating the menu. And so what you do is you look for another menu that tastes better. But you're confusing the meal and the menu. And so if you don't know that that's what's happening, I can control you because you believe you're free. You believe you're free to choose anything on the menu. So you believe you're free because you're being that the menu is real life. But it's not. It's just a tiny, tiny, tiny possibility of all possibility. But you don't think that way. You're being that the menu is life.
Gotcha.
But actually, you're just thrown into a culture, you're thrown into a family, you're thrown into a zeitgeist of a certain set of options that are inside this box. But you don't say to yourself, oh, gee, I wonder what box I'm in. I wonder what other boxes there are. Gee, I wonder if there's something outside of boxes in general. You don't think like that. You just are that the box you're in is real life. You don't realize that the box you're in
Yeah.
is just one story, just one interpretation, just one set of ideas that have been thought so long, and so many people have agreed to that idea with such strong traditions and cultures and rules and agreements that it doesn't occur to you, oh, I'm just thrown to be that way. I don't have to be that way. I'm just thrown to be that the matrix is real. And the only way out of the matrix is to open up to the possibility that you've just been making a matrix reality, but that the power was with you all the time. You were making it reality. You, in your own worldview, for you, what your personal reality, you were just being that that's reality without knowing that you were being that that's reality. So the way out of it is to know that you've been being that that's reality, and to be open to the possibility that maybe reality with a capital R can't be contained in that menu, and that menu is just one of many possible menus, and any menu is not real life. Any menu is just a conceptual set of ideas, a description of one way of looking at life. And so instead of the menu being useful to you, you're being used by the menu. Okay?
Until you develop the awareness. I get it.
And so you have to have doubt. There has to be something that humbles you to the point where you begin to doubt that the way you've put the world together and the way you've put yourself together is real, it's really real, and everybody else is wrong. Okay? What's that mean?
I'm sorry. That was a phone call. I apologize.
Okay. All right. So it's not easy. It's not easy because, like you said, in your example of your own life, you had a huge investment into your identity as a mother.
Yes.
Okay. And so if you are that you are a mother, and that's all that you are, and you are a mother, it's not just an office that you have. It's not just a function that you're providing for this young soul. But if you get your sense of worth and value and existence and identity from the role of being a mother, you're going to suffer because that's not all that you are. But you're being that that's all that you are, but you don't know you're being that's all that you are. And so you have this shock in your life, and it shakes you up, and then it either buries you or you go deeper and you find out that you're a lot bigger than you were being that you were. And so that's life. And there's no good or bad about that. There's no woman or man in the sky that's judging you that you should go one way or you should go the other way. You don't know other people's soul contracts. You don't know why they're here. You don't know. And so that gives you an insight, if you've been really actively listening and not just believing or not believing what I'm saying, but if you're standing on what I'm saying and letting those words take you to a deeper place than you might otherwise have gone if you weren't being here with me now, and you're looking for yourself, this is really the work of the spiritual path. This is the daily work of the spiritual path. It's one thing to have an initial aha moment, and that's the awareness Rosie was talking about earlier. It all begins with an awareness. But the road or the path from the initial awareness to completely embodying the truth of that being, that knowledge, that awareness, so that you're being that knowledge. You're not thinking about it, but you're just being that being. You're just being that knowledge. That is quite the journey. That is the journey. That is the spiritual path. And if you're fooling yourself into thinking because you had a peak experience that you've mastered something, you are going to suffer, because there's a big difference between having an opening and using that opening responsibly to steward that embodiment, as opposed to being addicted to the next peak experience. The next peak experience, like, you hear about people that have done 50 ayahuasca journeys. Okay. If somebody's doing 50 ayahuasca journeys, they're not being a good steward of the insights of the ayahuasca journey. What's happening is they have a new addiction called this peak experience that they're having in their ayahuasca journey.
And
So it's not that ayahuasca journeys are good or bad. It's, are you using them or are they using you? Right. Is this just the next addiction? Did you just substitute alcohol did you just substitute ayahuasca for alcohol? Or are you using the opening? Are you using that tool to have greater awareness, and then you develop the capacities, the conditions, the coherence in order to begin to embody that possibility that you glimpsed into your mind, into your heart, into your words, into your choices, into your cells, into your actions, into what you're being. If you don't understand that that's the spiritual path, you won't have a valid basis to assess how you're doing, let alone be able to guide anybody else. And so this development of these conditions and these contexts and the coherence and the capacitance, because we are multidimensional, in my experience of working with thousands of people, you have a higher batting average if you can, like, think about you as a hologram, or think about yourself as a diamond with many facets, but it's one diamond. But the diamond is only as strong as and brilliant as the worst facet, is the most out of balance facet. It's like a string of pearls, right? And so it's only as strong as the weakest link. And because we're multidimensional, all these levels interact with each other. And so that's why, in order for me to, once I realized what was involved in that spiritual path, to really develop a higher level of workability, I realized that either I needed to become proficient in many different areas and see how they related to each other and start to see patterns and meta patterns. I needed to understand the physical body. I needed to understand the nervous system. I needed to understand hormones. I needed to understand energy production. I needed to understand how the physical body worked. I need to understand how the subtle body worked. I need to understand about meridians. I need to understand about chakras. I needed to understand about how the mind works, how we represent experience to ourselves, how we get trapped in the mind. I needed to understand where emotions fit into all of this, and how to be with emotions in a way that they make a contribution to you rather than them stopping you or being an excuse. I needed to learn about mind management. I needed to learn how to use the mind so that the mind is a service to love rather than being the master. I needed to know the difference between what people call love and what real love is. I needed to know how to move energy. I needed to know how to communicate inwardly with myself, and I needed to know how to hold sacred space, but in a very focused way for other people. Okay. I needed to understand the biases of different cultures. I needed to understand the biases of my own culture. I needed to understand the biases of other cultures so that I could objectively look at the way I was thrown to be and the people that I would be working with, and what are other ways that people show up in the world that come from completely different cultures, and what are the fundamental principles that exist regardless of culture. And maybe that's a clue as to the deeper aspects of who we are. And so, you know, so I realized that if I'm going to help other people, I need to either get good at those things, or I need to find other people that are really good at some of those things that I'm not that good at, in order to tell people the truth, to tell people, okay, you tell me you're at point A, you tell me you want to get to point B, you know, and you're asking me if you're going to give me your trust, your time, your attention, your money, and you're trusting me. If I'm going to tell you, yeah, I feel really confident that I can help guide your journey to get from A to B, I better know where A is. I better know where B is. I better know what that journey is like. I better know what I'm qualified to guide you in. I better find other people who are qualified in areas I'm not. And so, you know, other people probably consider me like a teacher or a healer or a guide or a coach or a wise elder. But in my own sense of myself, I'm more like an eternal student, because 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 that's what keeps the whole thing fresh. You know, one of the things that I gave myself a discipline of, because I'd seen so many other teachers become stale, especially when something was successful, they would get trapped by their own success. There's an old Taoist saying that I love that goes, nothing fails quite like success. And so I gave myself this discipline that even though I've taught hundreds of workshops and seminars, I've never taught the same workshop or seminar twice.
Interesting.
Because that is my discipline, to keep myself fresh, to keep it real, you know. And so that's a useful foundation for you and your viewers and your listeners. Now, let me
put out a whole lot of nuggets on that one. And
let me throw something else into the pot, because probably a lot of your people are interested in spirituality. So in spirituality, there are two main paths, and they're both valid. There's the gradual path, which is statistically the more popular path, which I'm going to come back to and describe. And then there's what I'm calling the radical path. And that has a fire that's a lot hotter, and it's different. And so one is not better than the other. And I want to describe the two paths, and then I'm going to tell you the path that is my lineage. Okay? So the gradual path is the path that most people take. It occurs over many, many, many lifetimes, and it's an ongoing refinement of the body, of character, of understanding, of devotion, of practice, et cetera, to refine your own self. And it takes a long time, because your fundamental identity isn't being challenged. It's the identity that you currently have. And the slow path is saying, okay, let's refine that identity. but it's not challenging the fundamental existence of that identity. And so the gradual path takes a long time, many lifetimes, to get to the point where you're finally ready to really confront the idea that the you that you've been being, that you were for all of these lifetimes, that identity is also an illusion. That is the gradual path that is by far the most common spiritual path. Takes many incarnations, and it is a slower path. It's a more gradual path, and it's a totally valid path. And there are many teachers that teach that way, and that's fine. That's not my way of teaching. My way of teaching is part of the radical path. And the difference in the radical path is that the radical path does it backwards. The radical path challenges you right from the beginning that the you that you've been being, that you are, is not real.
Okay.
There's a fundamental premise to the entire path. And so that rocks your world, because if you begin to really entertain the idea, like, listen, if you really are open to considering the idea that the you that you being, that the you that you've been being, that you are, that you is just an idea. It's just a thought. It's just a human construct in the mind. That rocks your world. That rocks your world to the core. And then if you're a good teacher on the radical path, you just don't leave the student there and say, okay, now you figure it out. If you're a good teacher on the radical path, you've opened up that can of worms. And then it's your responsibility to steward your students along a lot of the issues that are dealt with in the gradual path. But because you're dealing with it from the beginning, from this incredibly powerful possibility, the path is much faster and much steeper.
Wow, interesting.
And you've got to be really hot to trot. You have to have a capacitance to be humbled to your knees fairly regularly without it stopping you, without it causing you so much pain that you quit. You have to be willing to see where you've been misperceiving without seeing that, without judging yourself mercilessly for having just realized that you've been living an illusion. You have to have tremendous compassion for yourself and other people to walk that path, because it's a very humbling path, because you're seeing that this whole thing you put together was based on a lie, and you're unraveling that web that you wove without knowing that you wove it. You're pulling the plug on the whole web, and it's starting to break down, and you have to have tremendous faith in you and in your guide, because it's such an intense path. And if you don't have the capacitance to have faith in the process, and to be aware of what you're actually experiencing, and not be in the habit of repressing your thoughts and emotions and your memories and your fantasies and your body sensations, you won't make it, because all those things have to come up to the surface to be examined in the light of this radical view. And it's not until later on the path that you know for sure that that radical view that your teacher is starting from the beginning, in the beginning, you have to take it on faith because you don't know it. Because if you knew it, you wouldn't need the teacher. So it takes a tremendous amount of faith and commitment and skill on the part of the guide to guide you through that radical path. And the only people that are qualified to do that are people that have walked that radical path. And so I would say that probably 95% of the people that see themselves on a spiritual path are on that gradual path. And that's totally fine. That's totally appropriate. But there's a small subsection of human beings that are really hot to trot. It's like they want to know truth no matter fucking what. You know, they're just not at peace with themselves unless that's their prime directive. And the soul has to be ripened to a certain to a certain level to have that kind of passion. And you can't rush that. You know, most people in a given lifetime just don't have it. But there is a small section of people that have been around the block enough that they've eaten enough menus and they know they keep barfing, that they get to the point where they realize, hey, maybe there's no menu that's going to do it for me. Maybe there's no human constructed sense of identity that's going to do it for me. No matter how much society thinks that's success, maybe it's hollow. You know, and the people that really, you've got to be humbled, and you're either humbled because you have what the world thinks is success and you feel empty, or you're humbled because you've tried everything and you're still suffering, or you have some kind of revelation. You have some kind of radical, miraculous something that opens you up to seeing what you couldn't see before. And so it's very important to understand that there are these two paths. They're both valid. It's just that the fundamental assumption that your current identity is real is questioned right from the beginning in the radical path and isn't questioned until the very end of the gradual path. And therefore, it sets in motion a process that has a completely different level of heat.
Mm-hmm. I'm getting it. It's it's funny you should mention about the humbling part of it, because I tell people all the time that one of the things that I feel God's worked with me on this whole decade has been that prior to my walking away from corporate America and going through everything I've gone through, I had a lot of ego, and I was a very prideful. And through everything that I've gone through, I've had to humble myself. So I get what you're saying there, definitely.
It's like when Jesus said, it's the Father within me that does the work.
Right.
Right? I mean, if you think you're hot shit, that's not going to be your experience. It's not going to be your reality. That Prime Creator is using you, is using your mind, is using your will, is using your intelligence, is using your sacred heart, is using your attention, is using you to extend the work. You're not going to, it's not going to occur to you that way if you think you're God, if you think you're hot shit.
You're right.
If you think it's all about you, no, it's not all about you at all. In fact, the you that you think it's all about is an illusion.
And that's what I also tell people, that a lot of times things that happen to us are not so much about us, but about the lives we're getting ready to bless. And so it ties right into everything.
Well, I would challenge you on that in the sense that it's not one or the other. it is about your own path. It is about what you need to learn. It is about what you came, like you said, to contribute. But it's also a lot about what you decided as your higher self before you incarnated. You decided pretty much in two main areas. You decided what you wanted to learn, things you felt like you hadn't mastered as well as you'd like to. And then you also decided where you already have a high level of skill and ability where you can contribute to others. So it's not really one or the other, but it's learning to have a balance there. And the idea isn't to get rid of your individuality. The idea is that your individuality is an authentic expression of the one. It's an authentic expression of love. It's an expression of real life. It's an expression of divine will, right? But in order to have that kind of knowledge, you have to have communion, and you can't have communion if you think you're the end all and be all. And so it's very difficult. The odds are really against you if you try to go on the radical path without a teacher. The odds are probably 9,999 out of 10,000 that you won't make it. You won't make it to the other side, so to speak, because it's too tricky. It's too easy to get entangled. So you have to have a really, really good guide. And you have to be a very responsible chela. You have to be a very responsible student where you're taking a very high level of responsibility for your own part in that relationship. It's probably the most intimate relationship you can have. That real teacher student, that real disciple, where pretty much you're putting your soul for a while in the hands of this guide. Because sometimes the guide is going to ask you to look at something you don't want to look at. Sometimes that guide is going to ask you, because it challenge you to get out of your comfort zone, and to trust that that guide knows what you can handle and what you're not ready to handle, and what you can handle is more than you think you can. That requires a tremendous amount of trust, and also the commitment on the part of the guide. Most people have no idea that it's a 24/7 commitment. You're holding sacred space for that person all the time. Your being is expanding to hold sacred space for that student all the time. And so you can't make that kind of relationship happen. It's something that both people consciously surrender into the Tao of it. You can't force that kind of relationship. There has to be right timing on everybody's part. There's a lot to it. And my biggest pet peeve, well, I have a few, but my biggest pet peeve is radical teachers who catalyze this awakening, this radical awakening, that what you've been being that you are is an illusion, is just a construct in your mind, and blow people wide open, and then don't take responsibility for stewarding their process. That's like somebody taking, that's like giving a little kid a stick of dynamite.
It's pretty scary.
They could burn the house down. It's like fire, right? It can warm you. It can provide light. We can also destroy an entire house, an entire forest.
Yeah,
And so,
that I can imagine be dangerous.
so you're like, it's kind of like playing with fire. It's kind of like, if I could give most people an example that they have more familiar with, in terms of when you're playing with fire, it's like when a relationship goes from a platonic relationship to a sexual relationship. You're playing with a whole new level of fire. And it can burn and it can hurt, or it can be a rocket ship that takes you to places that's very difficult to go otherwise, right? It can be a doorway for deep communion, for sharing, for learning, for bliss, for self-realization. But that requires an incredible maturity and skill in dealing with that fire, so that that fire is a wonderful thing and not something that burns. And so most people have no idea in our culture, no idea at all, that when they're sexually intimate with another person, what's really going on. They have no idea the depth of the exchange of the energy that can happen. And if it doesn't happen, how much it puts a rent in the system. Most people have no conception of it. It's like giving a kid a stick of dynamite. Okay. So most people have no conception of the type of commitment and trust that's required in a relationship between a student and a teacher on the radical path.
Yeah.
It's like, that's like the closest analogy or metaphor that I could give you and your listeners and viewers in terms of what you're dealing with. And that's why 95% of the people on a path, on the spiritual path, is totally appropriate for them to take the gradual path. It's just that that wasn't my path. And so I teach from my own experience. Okay. I teach from my own journey. Okay. And so I'm a part of that lineage, but it's statistically much more rare than a teacher that would guide you on the gradual path.
Yeah. So that's wild, Dr. David. We actually spent almost an hour on the first question. It's
But it,
a whole lot of nuggets, and it's been
but
amazing.
it creates a
Yes.
frame that
Yes.
allows for future possibility that would be difficult without that context. Like, most people are not trained to pay attention to context. Most people focus on content, and maybe they focus on process, and they don't realize that there's a context in which all of that is happening. So, for example, in the radical path, we say that a person's entire process in life is constrained by this context, which is this confusion of identity. And that fundamental confusion of identity constrains the kind of process you can have, and therefore constrains the results you can have. So most people aren't aware of context, and even if they are aware of context, they don't know how to change contexts if the context they're in isn't working. And so if you want to master anything, whether you know it or not, you're going to have to develop a facility with context in relation to that area of life. You're going to have to realize when the menu that you're living from isn't enough, so that you stop trying to pick different things on the menu or trying to make the dish on the menu a little tastier. and realize, hey, maybe what's required here is something that isn't even on this menu. And to realize that this menu is just one possible context in which all these choices exist. And depending on which choice you pick, the process is going to look a little different, but it's all constrained by the fact that you can only choose what's on that menu. And you don't know that that menu is just one possible context. You're thrown to be in this world you're thrown into with your parents and your culture and all that. You don't say when you're a little kid, you don't say to yourself, oh, this is an interesting menu. I wonder if there are other menus. And I wonder how menus are created in the first place. And I want to know if there's anything beyond menus. You don't say that to yourself. The menu you're thrown into just occurs to you like that's life. So the context in which you're living in is unexamined. And so the choices you have come from a context that you have not examined. But it's only by examining the particular context in which you're living from that you can begin to evaluate whether maybe some of the issues you're having have to do with the fact that the context you're living from simply doesn't allow for the possibility of what you're really after. Okay, so if you relate that back to the radical path, we say, hey, if you really want to know who you really are, we have to challenge the identity that you believe that you are now. So it's logical, but it's very challenging because your whole psychology, your whole social life, your whole way that you perceive things, your whole set of values, the kind of music you like, the kind of entertainment you like, your opinions, all of that is correlated with this context that you're living in, which is that the me that I think I am is really me.
So let me ask you, Dr. David, on the radical path, how long does it take you usually with a patient to be able to guide them to where they truly find their identity and find who they really are and to totally heal from?
I would say a critical mass of that, if the student is really dedicated, in most cases is probably around 7 years. I would say that, it's not like necessarily that they're enlightened, but they're rooted on that path, and they can manage on their own probably 90% of the time. And then they still have contact with the teacher from time to time in things that they're still struggling with. But basically, it's reasonable to say that if you're really committed, you can kind of turn the corner pretty stably, I would say. That's been, I would say, realistic. It might speed up because of the new frequencies coming onto the planet. And I'm sure it'll be much faster for my grandchild, because my grandchild, is coming in with a different set of software than I did. So I'm not stuck on the fact that it has to take 7 years. But historically, in my work with people over the last 40 or 50 years, I would say that is a reasonable description, but I'm not limiting it for the future. I'm not limiting it. But
so,
okay.
I want to go ahead and go into some of the questions that we've talked about in the past. One thing that stood out for me, previous conversation that we had, was your focus on helping people bridge the gap between inspiration and practical implementation.
Well, this is what we've been talking about. That first you have to realize that that's a huge gap.
Right. And what I wanted to ask you is, do you have a specific framework for that? How do you?
No, except for the fact that I have principles that guide me. But what makes it work is that it's incredibly unique to that person in that moment. So I don't have like a recipe, but I have principles. and values that I adhere to. So I'm going to kind of reframe your question a little,
Okay.
if that's okay.
That's perfectly fine.
Okay.
Go right
So,
ahead.
so my prime directive when I'm working with people is to protect the heart.
Gotcha.
That's my prime directive, is to protect the heart, to create a space of unconditional love, not just an idea of it, but actually the presence of unconditional love. And then within that type of safety and being held in that way, then we can begin to focus on the unique challenges that that person is having. But everything I do is, what's the word? I don't want to say subservient, but there's another word. It's in service to the prime directive, which is to protect the heart. And see, if you have safety, but you don't have focus, it'll go real slow. And if you have focus without safety, it won't work. So you have to have both. You have to have a safe space, and then within that space, you have to be laser-like in being able to focus on the valuable thing in that moment, in that particular way, with that particular person.
So it takes a combination of
So
focus.
that's kind of like the prime directive.
Good.
And then the other thing is, I'm not here to convince anybody of anything. This is very important. I have no investment in trying to make you change. My sense of identity, my idea of success isn't tied into any of that. What I'm all about is being present with you and having energetic and linguistic and touch conversation such that you are able to go deeper than you would have probably gone on your own, so that you discover where you are. You discover what is important to you. You discover what you really are wanting out of this relationship. And so what I'm describing isn't a recipe, but what I'm describing is the context, where I'm coming from and what I'm being. And it's almost disarming for most people to be in the presence of someone that has no hidden agenda. Because now you don't have to defend against my agenda. So now you have a safe space to go deeper than you'd be able to go if you were having to defend yourself. And that defense can be very subtle. And once you don't have to defend against me, then you can go deeper and find out where you're defending against yourself, where you're fighting yourself. But you don't have the space to do that with most people because you're defending against the other person's stuff. And so if you can be a being that doesn't have an agenda other than what you told the patient or the student is your agenda, which is to be there and be of service to them to the best of my ability, no fine print, end of story, and that I'm going to mean what I say and I'm going to say what I mean. Most people don't have much of an experience of being with somebody like that. And so when you're with somebody like that, either it's what you really want and are ready for, or it's something that scares the shit out of you. And so people find out really quick if I'm a person they want to work with, because if what they're about is trying to prove that nobody can help them, and they're not open to looking at that, they're not going to be around me very long.
Yeah.
And it's better for both of us. It's better
Right?
for both of us for them not to be around me very long. And so,
I hear you.
so, you know, either I will tell them or they will tell me very quickly, probably within the first 2 visits,
Right.
you know, this isn't working. I'm not the right person for you. What you're needing right now, I can't give you.
Right.
You know, so this is an important part of being a guide and a healer, is to realize you're not here for everybody. This is very important to realize that, and that you have certain gifts, you have certain joys, you have certain interests. You're not here to be all things to all people. You're not here. And another thing that's really important to realize, if you want to stay in the game and not burn yourself out, and if you want to be effective, is you're not here to save anybody. You are not here to save anyone. You're not here to play God. That's not why you're here.
No, they actually save themselves. You know, that's up to them. I hear you.
Yeah. You know, or maybe they get to the point where they realize that the you that they thought needed saving was an illusion.
Yeah, because sometimes they find out that they were fine all along. I get it. So let me ask you, Dr. David, how much of healing do you feel is learned to manage the direct our energy?
I don't
And how
understand
much
the
of
question.
it?
I don't understand that question. Can you say it another way?
Okay. How much do you think is physical and how much do you think it's our energy or who we are? How much of our
I don't think about it like
involves,
that.
involves our
Yeah,
how,
I don't think about it like that.
how do you think?
I see it as different facets of one diamond.
Okay.
I don't see it like percentages. That way of looking at it limits you from really understanding how holographic the whole game is. It
But
is
in
very
some,
holographic. We are multidimensional, and any intervention you make has the potential of rippling into other dimensions. Like,
but have you found in some patients that their situation is more physical than mental at times?
well, again, I challenge the assumption of your questions, but certainly there are situations where the physical body is so out of alignment that it's dominating their experience of their whole life. You know, if you have a broken arm, you know, and you don't address it, it's going to dominate your whole experience. If you have a raging infection and 105 temperature, it's going to dominate your whole existence. So it's one thing to take acute interventions to quiet the fire and buy you a little time. But the question then is, what is that person going to do with that time? Are they just going to keep doing what they were doing before? And that's the challenge. That's the challenge, right?
We've been having a lot of comments on our feed. Let me go look and see a minute. Some of the comments.
Are there any questions, or they're all comments?
That's what I'm looking to see right now. It's true. They're just talking about, yeah, it makes sense. Great. This is, I can't imagine many people have the commitment to this ride. What percent of your consults decide on this journey and are able to stick it out?
Small, like I said. It's probably of the people that believe that they are committed to their spiritual growth, it's probably about 1 in 20, I would say, that this fits their nature, this fits where they are. And again, I want to say something again, because it can be discounted, but I mean what I'm saying. The radical path is not better than the gradual path. I'm going to say it again. The radical path is not better than the gradual path. And I'm going to say it one more time. Listen to what I'm saying, because the place you're listening from has difficulty hearing this, because you've been thrown into a culture where you're being that faster is better. But faster isn't always better.
Right.
Try making a big left turn at 70 miles an hour. So I'm going to say it one more time so you can hear what I'm saying. The radical path is not better. It's not superior to the gradual path. It's just another way to go up the mountain. That's a little bit steeper, a little bit more challenging. But if you get the hang of it, it's much faster. If you have the right equipment, so to speak,
Right.
it's much faster. If it's what you truly are passionate about. But if you do it because you think it's better and you think you should do it, you're going to crash and burn so fast.
You got it.
That's why I said it 3 times.
Right, because you gotta go into it open-minded.
It's got to be something that almost calls you.
Right.
If it's something you think you should do, you shouldn't. If it's something you think you should do, you shouldn't. If it's something you think you should do because you think it's better, you shouldn't. Because that type of judgment that you're blind to is going to trip you up so fast you won't know what hit you.
Now, I also noticed, Dr. David, you wrote about, you have a book about hormones.
I do, because nobody's writing about hormones in a truly multidimensional framework. Yes.
Okay, so
I wrote it.
So what part? So can you regulate hormones naturally?
Depends on your level of consciousness. Most people have limited ability to do that, especially when you get older. Most people, by the time they're 40 or 50, by that time their testosterone levels, their estradiol levels, their progesterone levels, their DHEA levels, in women especially, their thyroid levels are so far away from optimal, and we live in such a stressful world that unless someone's willing to dramatically change their lifestyle and really, they have the wherewithal and the interest and the time and the money to really upgrade their lifestyle dramatically, it's very, very difficult to optimize the possibility of your human beingness without some kind of help, like nutrition and herbs and exercise and mindset and spirituality. Those things can really make a difference, but the ceiling, you'll tend to hit a ceiling. Like if your hormones are completely in the tank, your capacity to handle this is going to be limited. It's going to be a lot slower. And it's like you're wasting your money if you're taking these bioidentical hormones, but you're still eating like crap and you're still not working on yourself and you're not moving and all that stuff, you're wasting your money because the hormones raise the possible ceiling. But you're so far away from your ceiling as it is, it's not a magic bullet. It's not a substitute for everything else. But I've observed, especially once people get over about 40 or 50, they can be doing everything else to the very best of their ability, and they hit this plateau. Doesn't matter how hard they try, you know, especially if they have to live in a city, blah, 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 drive cars, right, sit at a desk, blah, blah, blah. You know, they're doing the best they can, but they hit the ceiling. And it happens. It happens all the time. And there's so much misunderstanding about the role of bioidentical hormones because they get conflated with synthetic drug hormone, variations that the pharmaceutical industry can patent. That gets very confusing. And so there's a lot of misinformation. And then also another thing that really messes people up is they go to their doctor and they do blood work and they don't realize that the reference ranges of normal are not based on really healthy people. They're based on the average sick American.
Wow.
And so the doctor says, oh, you're fine, but you know you're not fine. But the doctor is afraid to push you out of the normal range. They're afraid they're going to get their license taken away, blah, 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 blah. They don't know any better, blah, 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 blah. And so becoming proficient in bioidentical hormones is an expertise all of its own. And I studied with the best teacher in the world on that for quite a while. And so what was unique about me, as opposed to a lot of the other doctors that were studying, was a lot of the other doctors were studying coming from the medical world and had a hard time really embracing it because it's a different paradigm. But for me, it was easy because I was already in that optimization mode. And I knew from having been in practice for decades, I knew the truth of what they were talking about. I knew I had patients. I had myself that was doing the very best that I could, and I was hitting a plateau. I was eating well, I was moving well, I was thinking right. And, I was hitting a plateau. And this is something that, and now the whole latest rage, the last year or so, are peptides. And peptides target very specific things, but it's like not seeing the forest from the trees. It's like if your hormones are shot, you can spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month on this peptide, that peptide, this peptide, that peptide, but the frame isn't going to work.
So how do you find out if your hormones are not straight?
Well, you come to somebody like me who's trained in it. And then what we do is we first look at your lifestyle, right? And your metaphysics and see if we can, we see what we see how willing the person is to make changes. Because if they're not willing to make changes, then the hormones are a waste of money, probably. But if they are willing to make changes, we make those changes and then we do blood work. And then I have other forms of energetic analysis. And I'm a chiropractor, so we work on optimizing the nerve flow as well, and movement patterns and breathing patterns. And I'm, as an ontological coach, I'm also working with them on their mindset and on their being set. So all these things are going on, and it's another piece of the puzzle. It's another piece of the puzzle. But the thing is that each hormone, you can look at it from a biochemical point of view about what it's doing, but you can also look at it from an archetypal point of view and see what aspect of being that hormone represents. Okay. Right. So estradiol, which is the main estrogen, for example, has to do with feminine energy and radiance and that kind of natural effervescence and beauty, whereas progesterone has to do with the ability to to have capacitance, to hold, to be able to be with whatever there is, to be with a situation, to be with an emotion, to be with an idea, right? To be able to hold space. You know, testosterone has to do with with uh, with motivation and drive and oomph, you know, and that kind of masculine energy. So if you understand the hormones, not only biochemically, but you understand the archetype that they're representing, it really helps open the whole thing up. And nobody was writing about that. Nobody was writing about that. So my book is called Why Are Your Hormones Moaning? Why
So
are your hormones moaning?
hormones have,
In other words, the whole point is they're messengers. They're messengers from the inside of you to the outside of you. Why are your hormones moaning? Why are you out of whack? Why? And if you know why, then the whole process of working with the bioidentical hormones starts to fall into place and they take their right place. And nobody was looking at it that way, or nobody was writing about it. And so I guess I was the one to write about it. And it's ahead of its time. It'll probably become popular like in 10 years, but you can get ahead of the curve. You can go to Amazon and look up my name or look up Why Are Your Hormones Moaning? And you can get it in paperback or Kindle or hardcover.
so if I'm hearing straight, you're basically what I'm hearing is that most people's hormones are off whack, and 9 times out of 10, it has to do with their lifestyle and what they eat and what they do and how they go about it. Is that
And also factors that are beyond their individual control. You know, all the electromagnetic things that are in this room right now that you and I are dealing with that we don't even know about, right? And what's in our water and what's in our food and what's not in the soil and uh, all of the being around other people that are in chronic stress all the time, and you know, chemtrails and glyphosate and GMO food. You know, it's like we weren't like designed for this.
right?
You know, it's like,
I
and so there's natural consequences to the world we've individually and collectively created,
right.
right? And
So,
so, you know, in an ideal world, if our consciousness was completely enlightened, we wouldn't need the hormones. Okay, just like if we were completely enlightened, we probably wouldn't need to open our mouth, and we could just communicate telepathically, right? Or maybe we could bilocate, but we're not there yet. So we have cars and we talk, right? And we have telephones and we have smartphones and we have the internet. But someday we won't need it. But there are tools that we can learn to responsibly use. Bioidentical hormones are exactly like that. They're tools that we can learn how to responsibly use. But they're powerful. They're powerful, right? You're dealing with a pretty deep level of that person's physiology, right? So you have to know what you're doing.
got it. So, Dr. David, it's been a pleasure and it's been amazing talking to you. And we're gonna, guys, just so you know, we are gonna do a second episode on this, and who knows, we may end up doing a third. But for right now, Dr. Dave, can you tell our listeners where they could find you and where they can reach out to you?
Yeah, you know, if this is striking a deep chord in you, even if it's shaking you up, and even if it's rattling your cage a little bit, if there's something that you can't deny anymore that you're touching that you probably wouldn't have touched if you hadn't been here, and it's something that, even though it's a little scary to you, it's something you know that your soul has been crying out for, know that just because I'm a teacher on the radical path doesn't mean that I have an idea how fast you should go. I'm going to say that again. Just because the context is radical doesn't mean I have an opinion about how fast you should or shouldn't go. I'm not trying to make you go fast. I'm giving you a space of possibility, and I observe what you do with that, and then I respond to that. Okay? So that's something that's important to understand. Just because the context is radical doesn't mean that I'm not exquisitely sensitive to the pace to guide you at. Those are two different things. Okay? 7 years is a long time.
Right.
Okay? So you got to kind of separate those two things to really understand what I'm talking about. So if you feel moved to reach out to me, or somebody comes to your mind, whether this is for you or not, if you have this thought, oh, I know this person, this is what they're looking for, you can have them get in touch with me, and I'll give you my email address. I'll give you my my websites, and I'll give you my phone number. So my email address is david.kamnitzer@gmail.com. That's david.ka, M as in Mary, N as in Nancy, I, T as in Tom, Z as in Zebra, ER, david.kamnitzer@gmail.com. My website about my work is davidkamnitzer.com. And my website about the book, you just put DR, like Dr. DR. You just put it in front of the first one. So it's the first one for my practice is davidkamnitzer.com, davidkamnitzer.com. And then the one for the book is just DR, davidkamnitzer.com. And then if you want to reach me, I'm on Pacific time on the West Coast in the United States. So try not to call me at 3 a.m. But my phone number is 858. So if you're from out of the country, you probably have to dial 1 first. 858-204-3092. 858-204-3092. If I don't pick up, you can leave a confidential message. No one else picks up my messages except me. And then if it's appropriate, I'll get back to you. So
Awesome.
just in review, david.kamnitzer@gmail.com, davidkamnitzer.com, drdavidkamnitzer.com, 858-204-3092. One thing that I would appreciate if you have a few minutes before we go
Sure.
is I'd love to have you share about how this conversation is impacting you, Rosie. What's moving in you?
I've spoken to you on multiple occasions, and it's been a blessing. I mean, your insight, you go real deep in a lot of areas that, I mean, my whole decade journey that I've had, I've dove deep into neuroscience, and a lot of the things you've spoken about are a lot of things I've found to be true as I've been walking through this. Again, I know that nutrition have a big factor. I know all the like you said, all the chemicals, all the how you call them, different things that are being put in our foods. Everything plays a big factor on what happens with us. And it's funny you mentioned about the blood work, because I'm being told that my blood work is amazing, and I do feel great. But they gave me a pill for cholesterol, and I was like, wait. So my blood doesn't work as great, but they're giving me a cholesterol pill.
Okay, so we'll go down that rabbit hole another time, but I hear you.
And it's like, and it's wild to me that almost 80% of Americans do not feel confident about our medical system anymore. So yes, it's a lot of things that I believe that people need to understand curiosity to me is huge. I've always been one that questions a lot of things, and I just believe, and that's what you dove a lot into. I do believe that if we accept that we don't know everything, if we accept that things can be different, and it all boils back to neuroscience as well, we're able to, our minds open up to the possibility of other things. And when it opens up to the possibility of other things, we only use 10% of our brain, Dr. David. So if we were to use 100%, you're right. There's no telling what we could do. So I enjoy you. I get pleasure in speaking to you, and I feel privileged to have you on here. So I thank you, and I look forward to this conversing more with you in the near future.
Okay.
So, and I will, yes, so I recently overcame my fear. I don't know if you knew this, but I recently overcame my fear of being in front of camera. This is my 35th episode on a podcast. So believe it or not, I am extremely, extremely nervous. This has been longer than I normally do. So I will go back and listen to every bit of this because I want to deep dive before I speak to you again into certain areas that I might have missed because of being so nervous. So yes, definitely.
Yeah, I would strongly recommend to everybody, if you have a sense there's some gold in here to be mined, it can be very, very useful to watch or listen to this many times. And the advice I would give you is don't worry about what you're not getting. Just focus each time you listen on what you are getting, and then each time you'll get something more.
I like that.
It's not, it's important to understand that the kind of teacher I am is, I'm not fundamentally trying to tell you something. I'm not trying to get you to agree with me. I don't care if you agree with me. I'm not interested if you agree with me. I don't want you to believe me. I don't want you to not believe me. So in that sense, what I'm after is something that's really different than what most people are after with you. Most people are after trying to persuade you to something or trying to get you to believe something. But I'm not interested in that at all. I could care less if you leave this encounter saying, I believe everything he said. I don't care. That won't make any difference. I don't care if you don't believe anything I'm saying. That won't make any difference either. That's just rearranging the furniture on the Titanic.
Right.
What I'm after is to be with you in a way that you're with yourself in a way that you likely wouldn't have been with yourself if we hadn't been here together. And so if you know that that's what I'm about, it might help you to get the most value out of being with me.
Oh, Dr. David, I think I get a lot of value out of being with you since I've met you. So I appreciate you and I thank you. And I am humbled and I feel honored to be with you. And God bless you. And definitely I'm looking forward for our next podcast as well. So in this, anything else you'd like to say, Dr. David, or
how do people access this? Like people who weren't here live, how will they find out about it? How will they, where are the links to where this will be? How do people access this?
Well, first of all, I am going to send you a copy so you have your own version, but they can access it through my Facebook page, through my YouTube, or through my LinkedIn.
Would you just send me those links?
Most definitely. Most
Okay.
definitely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the letter I sent you, in the form I sent you, is all those links, but I'll send them to you again. Also, I will send you, I'm going to go ahead and this recording will be on my drive. and I'll link you to it so that you'll be able to get the full recording as well. So you can do whatever you'd like
Okay.
with
But
your
if you have it, but if you already have it on YouTube, for example, I'd love to have that link, or if you have it in other
Yes.
places, because it makes it easier to share.
Right. And I also will have it on my Jeremy's Unity flight. I've got a page that's about podcasts, and all podcasts are there. And on that site, I also put your links and how
Okay.
they can reach you.
Yeah.
So that's
And I would
everything.
just, yeah, I would say the only other thing I would say is what I just said a few minutes ago. If you really have a deep feeling that there's some gold in these hills and you want to mine them, there's nothing wrong with like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 listenings over a period of several weeks. But don't force yourself to do it. But just, you'll be amazed if you're really committedly listening. When you hear the recording of this, you'll hear things you didn't hear the
Oh,
first
there's
time.
no doubt. There's no doubt. I'm sure that I'm sure there will be. I'm sure there will be. And let me tell you, we've had a lot of comments. And one of the things I do after the podcast too, I go through all the comments and I speak back to everybody. So
Was there any particular comment that you want to throw at me or share with me, or nothing hit you like that?
this is so true. I had no idea what was mine until my 50s. Because
Uh-huh.
no, cause and effect, all the way to the quantum level. Yeah, yes. This guy is speaking truth. Glad you are having another episode with him.
Do you remember I told you at the very beginning as a child what was moving me? Was I wanted to know what was real. I wanted to know what was really true beyond people's opinions.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. Definitely, and interesting, and yeah. So I am going to go back and respond, and like I said, I'll go ahead and have all this recordings. I'll get everything to you, Dr. David. If you like, we could talk for a few minutes after we get done. And to my Sunblazers and Heroes, thank you for being here tonight. I want to leave you guys with this. Remember, you are not broken, you are not behind, and you are not absolutely not lacking. Okay, so stay tuned for the next episode, and until next time, keep lacing and keep flying, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you, and you all have a great evening. God bless.